The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Yours truly here, Eric Cavanaugh, and I'm so excited to kick the new year off with one of the hottest topics in data. It's really driving the information economy, quite frankly, and that is insights, right? Insights are the new nuggets, is my theme today, the new gold, why insights are nuggets. I did a webinar late last year talking a lot about different ways to get insights. There are lots of different applications you can use these days to get analytics. There's inline analytics, or embedded as they call it, quite frankly. Lots of different ways you can get to the nut, if you will. But I did some research, and a good friend of mine, Mark Madsen, years ago had done a presentation where he talked about the gold rush and how the narrative around the gold rush is actually quite inaccurate. The narrative, as we understand it, is that a bunch of people went out there with their little pans and they went out to the rivers and got a bunch of gold and struck it rich. And that's not really what happened. Some of them did. The panhandlers, basically. Some of them did get nuggets and make some money, but really the big money didn't come until the industrial machines came in with a lot of investment and money and workers and dynamite and machinery to just sift through all this stuff. That's when a lot of the real gold came out, was from big business. But what I find so fascinating is that to this day, gold and nuggets and those kinds of expressions are still just baked into our lexicon, into our language, how we talk about this stuff. Think about like when people say, is everything panning out for you? What does panning out mean? Like the pan that they're holding in the river to get the gold nuggets. That's what it means. So we even refer to nuggets. Oh, we get some good nuggets. That's referring to gold. So insights clearly are the nuggets. They are what are allowing us to change business processes, come up with new products, send the right messages to the right customers, to the right prospects, et cetera. All that is driven by insights, and that's the gold of today. So today we're going to talk to Ryan Keane. He is a very interesting guy right here in Pittsburgh with WGSN, VP in Data Science and Analytics over there. We'll talk to our buddy Hyoun Park of Amalgam Insights. He's the founder and principal over there. And Yves Mulkers, our good buddy from Belgium. He's of 7W Data. So I'll start it off with you, Ryan. First of all, thanks for doing the show. And second of all, tell us a bit about yourself, WGSN, what you folks do and how you do it.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Data Science Analytics here at WGSN. WGSN leads consumer trend forecasts across fashion, beauty, interiors, food and drink, consumer tech, and consumer insight. My team is to bring the quantitative side of data that works with our subject matter experts to help project those trends into the future for our clients. And so we publish a number of reports, and we also do a bunch of advisory work as well to support that business.
Yeah, and this is so cool. I was mentioning before the show that about 10 or 12 or maybe 13 years ago, I made a prediction that before too long, you'll be able to just go rent or buy the analytics themselves instead of having to stand up servers, load your data warehouse technology, load your BI applications, all that stuff, which lots of companies do. There's a lot of effort that goes into that, especially now that we're in the data science era. Well, data science is hard. I mean, I often refer to it as the assiduous management of information assets for corporate benefit, and that's really what it is. But data science, you have to be bulletproof. Your methodologies have to be strict and stern and clear, and you have to be very careful about that stuff. And not too many companies, I think, are as careful as they should be with their data. But the point is, you can just rent the stuff today. Now, it took longer than I thought, but it sounds to me like, Ryan, you folks are doing exactly what I was predicting 12, 13 years ago. And you're doing it primarily for the fashion industry. And you capture data from all over the place, right? I think you've got your 5S comments, or tell us about that.
Yeah, we like to call it as the 5 S's. So basically they stand for shows, social, shelf, search, and sentiment. So we bring those disparate data sources together to tell a complete story, because the answer doesn't lie in any individual data source. It's a matter of bringing the data sources together to tell that story holistically. So show data, so as we talk about fashion, that's the catwalks that happen in Milan, Paris, New York for multiple seasons. Social, right? You know, the Instagram, TikTok, etc. Shelf data, right? That's what's actually being sold in the market. How do we know what's selling, what's not selling, what's getting marked down at the end of the season? Search, right? Consumers go online to search a lot about products, what to buy. something about those products. We have over 5 years of data there that we look at as well. And then sentiment, right? We put out a survey to just ask consumers, what are they purchasing? What do they think about particular brands and retailers, et cetera? So we bring all that together to basically go through and try to find those signals of emerging trends, or try to map out where trends are in their life cycle as they progress over time. And so we bring that together to go into a lot of our reports, but also we work with individual clients as well to help them specifically with their questions.
You know, you brought up the perfect word right there to help articulate to the audience what we're talking about here: signal. Right? Anytime you're doing analysis, you're trying to find the signal versus the noise. And since we're on a radio show here, I'll just point out, noise is the static in between the stations. So for those of you who can still change, by numbers to scroll around and see where the radio stations are in this particular area, that's static. That's just noise. That's not helping you. I mean, maybe white noise can help you go to sleep at night if you're that kind of person, but signal is what you want. And then once you find the signal, that's when you can kind of understand what's happening, where things are going. That's when you can suggest to your clients which styles, which types of material, for example, like denim you mentioned before the show, they should explore. And that's how you optimize the whole process, right?
That's correct. And I think, as you were talking about data science, I mean, that's where data science really comes to play, right? I mean, humans have a difficult time sometimes to really go through the noise and find where those signals are. And so we use data science to really use the machine to its best advantage to detect those signals, which may not be clearly obvious to the human. But the human still has a really big part in this too, right? Those subject matter experts, they're also looking and reading a lot about what's happening in the industry, and they have a better idea of getting intuition and getting the big picture of what's happening. And so, I always like to try to dispel this myth of man versus machine. And here it's human and machine, right? Because I think the two working together will deliver the best results. So we can have data science do what it does best, but we also have the subject matter experts in the industry work with the machine to augment those insights so that we can tell a better story for our clients.
Yeah, that's just fantastic advice too, and perspective, because you're right. It's not, I frankly lament how the narrative gets shaped in mass media, because to your point, how often it's like, oh, well, AI is going to take jobs away. No, AI is not going to take jobs away. It is going to change the jobs that we have. And there was some great line that someone used that said, AI won't replace any jobs, but people who use AI will probably replace people who don't use AI. So you need to use the latest tools. But I think you're exactly right about the human side of things, because we want the machines to till the earth, basically, to use that sort of agricultural analogy, till the earth, get it ready to plant things. And then you use all the data to understand what's growing, what's not growing. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of science in that space these days. But even like you say in retail and fashion, just knowing which materials, which vendors, which, what's happy, what's exciting, what do people want these days, all that comes together. But then people are a huge part of that equation. No machine's ever going to tell you just exactly what to do all through your processes. You have to stitch all that together, and that's the human side, right, Ryan?
Exactly right. But also, to train a good machine learning model, it depends on good data, right? And where does that data come from? Well, at the end of the day, it probably comes from a human, who tagged different images with certain labels, et cetera. And so, as I mentioned to you, we've been tracking catwalk shows for over a decade, and we have a team of people who've been tagging those with very specific details about what those models are wearing. Well, that's a huge data set that we can then use to train the models to do that more effectively. But again, a machine's only as good as the data you input into it, right? It's never perfect. And so I think when you bring that human element in, not only do you tell a better story, but you can also create that feedback loop where you can then improve the overall model, right, by making it better over time. So that's why I think the two really go in tandem. I don't see the machine ever fully replacing the human. If anything, the human's always there. And I fully agree. Those individuals who, maybe their job changes, all they do is move on to something else, or even better, in a way where they can use their expertise better.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And help the company grow, right? Because the human is going to be in the loop, and the humans will learn from the data. And one of my theories, I'll be curious to hear what you think about this, and then we'll bring in Hyoun to comment on it, Hyoun Park from Amalgam. But I believe that what you really want to do with these data science applications and programs is use that information to fine tune your own instincts. Because there is another, I would call it false debate of, oh, do you trust the data or do you trust your instincts? It's not either or. You're going to have your instincts about things, but you need to be honest with yourself about the data, pay close attention to it, and allow that to fine tune your instincts. Because usually if your instinct is telling you something, there's a reason for that. And that reason is usually pretty deep and complex, but it's palpable because you sense it and you feel something. Now, don't drive off a cliff if your instinct tells you to, but nonetheless, you do want to honor and trust the human decisions and determinations that we make, so long as we're balancing that with data and with insights. But what do you think, Ryan?
100% agree. In a past life, I worked for a CEO who was a little bit, wasn't really bought in with data and science. And so he was like, well, I follow my gut, right? And, we came back and said, well, we're not here to replace your gut. We're here to give you a data-informed gut. And right. I think that's a clear distinction in the sense that I think we're trying to bring in the data to help inform that instinct, right? Because that instinct is right. And sometimes we don't necessarily know why we feel like this is the right path, right? But obviously, our brains are very complex and bringing and stitching all this information together. And so there is a place for that instinct. And I think all we're trying to do is provide some data to help show that instinct has got some backing, right? Ideally with data to tell us the right direction to go in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, stick around for the roundtable, Ryan. Let's bring in Hyoun Park from Amalgam Insights. And I think you're like me, Hyoun, you hear someone like Ryan talking about what they do, and it just gets you excited, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's so many things that we could talk about just based on that. But let me do kind of a last in, first out. Just thinking about how we are using data and how we input data. It's definitely not enough to just have people involved in the data, but people involved in training the model and making sure that the model matches the way that we think about things. There's a lot of complexity there for people to get involved in artificial intelligence, the analytics, the algorithms, however you think about that. And, that's going to be a massive job. Frankly, the decision-making process associated with what we do is so much more than simply putting in some data and expecting one specific output. We make a lot of judgments in what we do, frankly. And a lot of that is based on simply going back to the fact that, these brains that we have, they have been reinforced by millions of years of activity that got us here. All of our ancestors making the decisions that kept them alive and led to us, and then reinforced by a lifetime of experience. And it's impossible to get all of that put into the data that you're putting into an algorithm to make a decision. So you're always going to need some human input to get into this. Another thing I was thinking about, Eric, is when you introduced this show, talking about nuggets. And I loved how you brought up how that the big money came from industrial mining, not the panhandlers, but it shows how nuggets are kind of the guiding, kind of this initial starting point. Like if you find the nuggets, there's them gold in their hills,
That's right.
as they used to say. But, that's how oh, I found one starting point. And now I know where to put my industrial machines. Right. I'm reminded of when I used to do fantasy baseball for money. One of the things I used to do was I would look for these leading indicators, these nuggets that would show where I should go for next year. So, like we all do, when I looked at my league, I would first look at every category. I would figure out the variance within each category, then go look at the top 300 players and then do a regression of the last 3 years of their performance to figure out the variance of all of their stats within each category. And then look for the little things that shined, the little nuggets. And the things that really stood out, the things that looked really weird. And, that would be my starting point for being able to figure out what I would do for the next year. It starts with one or two little nuggets that you find that lead to finding that whole universe of possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah, what a great way to describe it too. You just reminded me of how crystals are made, or also how raindrops form, right? When they seed the clouds, you probably heard about this, folks. When they seed clouds, what they do is they put these teeny tiny little particles up into the air, because then the moisture will kind of grab onto those particles and then form around it. And that's kind of what Hyoun is talking about here. When you find some nugget, it's an analytic that you encounter. It's an insight that you ascertain by looking at the data, and that gets you started. Now that starts a whole thread. And Ryan was talking about that with the signal. That is the signal. When you find the signal, like, aha, here's a radio station that I like. Let's put it on auto program number 1. I'll listen to it again. It gets you started. It gets the ball rolling, so that then the brain forms new ideas around it. How can I make a process out of this? How can I automate it? All that stuff follows when you find the signal, right, Hyoun?
Exactly. That starting point. And I think that's increasingly difficult to find, though, because now we're still looking for these starting points, but data is getting bigger and bigger. We have more different types of data that we're looking at. All of a sudden, every audio file, every picture, every video is now data. That used to be just the crap that you dumped into your archives and maybe looked at once or twice over a decade before you threw it out. Now we actually look for indicators in all of that stuff, and now we have definitely easily 100 times the amount of data that we had a decade ago to look for the same nuggets of information that we've always been looking for.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. And you do have to know roughly where you want to go with something, right? I mean, you can keep an open mind about stuff, but you should have a purpose of what you're trying to accomplish. And, we'll talk about this throughout the show, I'm sure. Forever align your activities with business outcomes. What is the business outcome we want to achieve? And be specific with yourself. Is it to increase the top line? If you're like me, you always want to, let's get more business, let's get more people coming in. But then you got the whole operations side of things. We're getting much better about being able to understand the costs of things. And you see it in the language. That's what kind of excites me is ML ops, data ops, marketing ops. That's the operations. That's the actual workflow. What people are sitting down and doing, they're using new machines. They're using new processes, new data. They're building these data pipelines, for example, in real time to sense what's happening and then build out some protocol or some way to respond to all that. Just amazing things are happening now, but nuggets are the key. They get you started, just like Hyoun said. We'll be right back. Your host here, Eric Kavanaugh. We're talking today with Ryan Keane of WGSN, Hyoun Park of Amalgam Insights. And next up, Yves Mulkers from 7W Data. So I'll bring Yves in. You heard us talking with the first couple of guests about some of the trend lines and signal versus noise. I mean, these are the fundamental tenets of what we're doing is we're looking for the signal, and it's exciting. When you find the signal, that gets analysts fired up, right, Yves?
Exactly. I think signals, but not only signals. It's about patterns, and you call them nuggets. It's looking at your data, augmenting it with not only your internal data but external data, and getting that complete view of your business and the ecosystem of your business. And if you can see what is happening in there, that can mean the competitive advantage you're getting by using the analytics. The signals is something that helps you drive and respond to whatever is happening in your business and optimize it on that. Otherwise, you're just repeating whatever has been done last year. Typically, if you look at your balance sheet, your accountant tells you, okay, you made an increasement, 5% more revenue, 10% more revenue. Maybe he's able to predict you, however your margin has changed or whatever. But if you can respond to these small signals, that's what is helping you with doing analytics in that respect. We talked about as well trusting your gut feeling, and I've been wondering, being so long in this analytical field and always thinking with my head, and wondering why some other people were pretty successful only trusting on their gut feeling. It came clear in talking to various coaches that these people are thinking with their reptile brain, and Hyoun brought that up as well before. there is something that reptile brain that helps you think faster, and that's the few million years of experience that humankind has in their body, and helps you in a kind of way acting and responding faster than you can do with your just thinking with your brain, which is not responding that fast. And I think that's a good balance where we need to look into. We as people use the machines to help us in analyzing our data and supporting us in our decision system. So in that respect, it's like we say, the machines won't replace the people, but it will be a very good combination, an ecosystem where we help each other in augmenting that. We see that happening as well, not only in where we typically use analytics in reporting parts, but as well in doing the data management, where it's been said just before, where we said AI systems, they need good data to build good systems and good models and make good predictions. And that's where we see that the machine is helping again, and the algorithms are helping in optimizing all the data that we are feeding into these systems.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, it is a virtuous circle, and it's important to, I mean, for an example, in the opening segment, Ryan was talking about how with the catwalks, they have people who are going in and tagging manually a lot of these different types of dresses and different types of clothing and so forth. That all gets baked into a model that helps them predict what's coming down the pike, right? But there is this sort of dance between the people, the technologies, and the data, and you want that to be as fluid as possible, right? I think that's one of the keys, is you want that to be a very seamless experience. You don't want it to be truncated or chopped up or separated by large pieces of time. That was the old hindrance of the ways of doing things 10 years ago. Even today, quite frankly, is if you have to go to IT to ask them to do something that's going to take 2, 3, 4 weeks to get done, just so you can get a new view of your data, you know, you're probably going to forget what you were thinking about 2 to 4 weeks ago by the time it comes around. So you have to work out all of those gaps, I suppose. And I think we're getting a lot closer, because A, the technology is getting better, B, the data is everywhere, but C, I think also there's a maturation about the processes of standing up these kinds of solutions to the point where, and in Ryan's case, you know, they're a B2B play. So they've got a platform that people subscribe to and they can log in and do whatever they want. And I just love that. I mean, I think that's a fantastic business model. I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward, because again, to do it all yourself is pretty intense. I mean, it takes a lot of effort, and the skills gap is brutal. I was talking to someone just the other day saying, man, trying to hire people, this guy had 2 data engineers stolen from underneath him in the last couple of months, you know, so the need is out there, but you have to make it simple, right, Yves?
Exactly, the simple part, being in the process, having done data integration, matching all the data together manually, all myself, time and time again. What we see now with the low code and no code and automation tools which are out there that help us aggregate and integrate data in a much easier and faster way, that is very more helpful. And that's exactly the knowledge what we've built as a human, and have been seeing being put into systems that helps you automate that, where you can now use that intelligence to operate the systems and see what is going wrong and where you can improve, but focusing more on the business aspect than purely on the technical aspect of integrating and massaging the data to prepare that. So initially where you said, okay, we start with a logical model and we look at the business part of it and see what we need, and then trace back to the sources and look at the type of data, what you need. This is now all supported by algorithms and automation systems, and at a much more scalable size, thanks to cloud and more elastic computing, what you have in this space. So that's right. What I see happening now right away.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Just the elasticity of the compute and the storage and so forth, that's a big deal. The cost of storage dropping through the floor, that's a big deal, because now you can store lots of data much less expensively. I mean, I think the frustrating part is there are so many moving parts that you're never going to get a static view of the world anymore. Everything is always in motion. And so you just got to get your sea legs, figure out what makes sense for you, and maybe plan, I don't know, quarterly or probably not monthly. That's probably too short a time span, but we do have to change our way of planning and interacting with the data and interacting with our teams and our technologies, right? It's the whole world moves a lot faster these days, right, Yves?
Yeah, and that's where we see typically we have the batch processes, and now we're focusing more and more on real-time aspects, because the ingestion part for the data has become much more easier. All the systems are foreseen to ingest that data in a continuous way. So that allows you to have the latest data in such a way, but it forces you, if you look from an architecture perspective, to build your systems in a different way. Always think within mind as well, flexibility. If you have a database and tomorrow you will have a new type of database that will support you or will give more functionality in a certain aspect, you need to be able to have that replaced in an easier way. The cloud is a kind of way of doing that, but we see that more and more happening in on-premise systems as well. So that's a new way of architecturing your systems. And the advantage of going to platforms is that these people think about that and prepare that for you as a business. So you don't have to think about that. Which type of licenses will I have to buy? And will I have a lock-in for the next 4 years for this type of vendor, for example?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Let's bring Ryan Keane back into the conversation as well. You know, Ryan, the more I think about your offering and how you folks have approached this, I think it's just a fantastic way of cracking the nut, because again, we want to get to the nuggets. We want to get to the meat inside that nut. We don't want to be messing around with all the chattel, if you will, or the chaff, and separate the wheat from the chaff. But you're also very focused, right? Because there's so, I mean, we have this embarrassment of riches these days in terms of data types, data amounts, where we get data from, what we can do with it. But because you have such a tight focus, you can really provide ongoing value to your clients, and you make it easy for them. Just log in, see what the research is, grab some analytics, go and make a decision. I think it's even more sophisticated than the model I was originally thinking about 20 odd years ago, or 15 years ago, I guess. And it's very cool because again, it's a B2B, and it's a platform where people log in. And I'm sure you guys probably monitor a lot of who uses what and all that kind of stuff. Can you tell us about some of the inner workings of the system?
Yeah. But one thing to build off of, we were just discussing here, going back to your nugget analogy, which came to mind, is when you think of the value of a nugget, right? Well, what makes it even more value? It's when you refine that gold nugget into something like a gold ring or jewelry, right? So part of, I think, this analogy with data is, as I said, kind of getting rid of the chaffs and other things to it is just as important as finding the nugget in itself. And so I think how we use and take that data to turn it into something that, knowing what the needs of those clients are, we can then make it more attuned to what we know they will find even more valuable than the raw gold itself, which is its finished product. And so I think that's a critical part of insight, right? Which is just taking and communicating that in a way that makes it much more valuable. Building off to your question though, in regards to internal, absolutely. We get and track a lot of data around how our clients use our platform, but we know something about them too, what industries they're part of, what roles they play in those companies. And so again, that's where we can use machine learning, because we may think sometimes what articles may be relevant for that individual, but the best way also is to build some recommendation engine to basically take in how they're browsing, so that observe the behavior, and also other people like them, and then even recommend content to them that may be relevant for them. And maybe in something they may not even thought of themselves, right? We're basically connecting the dots for them based on the behavior. And so absolutely, as part of our platform, that's another side of my team, which is trying to figure out how we can better serve that content to them.
Big thanks to all of our guests today. Look these guys up online: Ryan Keane from WGSN, Hyoun Park from Amalgam Insights, and Yves Mulkers of 7W Data. We'll talk to you next time, folks.